Hello, this is the lecture for Ancient Medieval History for Wednesday, the 11th of May, 2022. We are now shifting into the Crusades. In the Middle East, the Abbasid Caliphate, which had ruled everything from Morocco to the Pakistani border, had been invaded by and eventually limited by the arrival of the Turks. The Turks entered into areas north of the Abbasid lands and compete with them. The Turks and the Abbasids are different. The Abbasids are Arabs. The Turks are Turks. They're both Muslims. But the cultural differences between these two groups is in some ways as great as the cultural differences between the Hebrews Christians and the Greek Christians. They're both Christians, but Greek culture matters. Turkish culture matters. For example, the Turks are not nearly so iconoclastic as the Arabs are. While the Turks don't do a lot of hugely realistic art, their art is stylized realism. Much more realism than the Arabs who favor geometric patterns as their art would ever have been comfortable with. The Turks are also new converts. They are a warrior people from Central Asia, and they have all the fervency of new converts, just like a person who just quit smoking is almost insufferable. Because most of the time they're like, well, you should quit smoking too. Or a person who discovers that vegan is the way to go. Well, you should be a vegan. You know what I'm saying. Somebody who just discovers a new idea suddenly feels the need to become a missionary for that idea. And it can be tedious and obnoxious. But, they're fervent to the point of being fanatical. Well, the Turks are like this. And one of the things that the Abbasids had done is they had kept the holy places. And since Christians and Jews are also people of the book, we're not Muslims, but Christians and Jews do worship the one true God, even if they do it wrongly. So pilgrims from Christendom were permitted to go to the holy places as long as they paid their taxes and were respectful of Muslim culture, customs when they were in the Muslim areas. And basically their safety was provided by the Abbasids, the standard law and order. Jews were permitted, as well as Christians, to live within the Abbasid Caliphate, if as kafir or kufar, as second-class citizens. We talked about this. But the Turks are a lot more willing to be harsh to people who worship the one true God falsely. And therefore, pilgrims going to Jerusalem and Bethlehem and Nazareth and the Sea of Galilee and all the other holy places began to be molested by bandits and by government officials, and it just becomes harder and harder to, in good faith, send people that you care about to that land because they're going to be messed with. And the Turks don't care. I mean, they don't see themselves as being necessarily responsible for a bunch of unbelievers and infidels. Add to this, in 1071, one of the great turning point battles of human history happens. In 1071, near the Kilikian Gates, the Battle of Massacred is fought. And we have talked about this. And the Battle of Massacred is the battle where the Turks break through the Kilikian Gates and take the Anatolian highland plateau in the center of what is now Turkey. This is going to critically weaken the Byzantine Empire to the point where the question is, can the Byzantine Empire even survive without the Anatolian Plateau, without the natural resources, the farm products, the population? A lot of the best soldiers from the Byzantine armies came from that region. And now that region's under the Turks, and the Turks are very, very big about converting people to Islam. So the Turks are going to be enriched by this conquest. The Byzantines are weakened. And this is a combination of things that changes the nature of society in that part of the world. Furthermore, and this is just beginning to be felt, during the time of the Crusades, but it is something you need to understand, Temujin of the Mongols is going to unify the Mongols and create a vast army, a horde of Central Asian horsemen that are going to conquer China. They're going to conquer India. And they're going to conquer Persia. And they're going to conquer huge parts of the Islamic Middle East. And this is going to be a factor in the way that the Islamic world responds to the Crusades. Because the Crusades, in comparison to the Mongols, is the difference between a mosquito that's biting you and flying around your head and irritating you, and, I don't know, piranhas flying through the air, stripping your body of all its flesh. And one of the things I am grateful for, and that you should be too, is that God in His holy wisdom never decided to make piranhas air-breathing flying creatures. Because that would be bad. They're bad. Yeah, it would be bad. Awesome. Bad. Woo! Go out and see them, Dan. Okay. Do that. So, I don't know why I think that's so funny. So, this is going to set the stage for the Byzantine emperor to do something he really doesn't want to do. Because the Byzantines look at the Western Christians as a bunch of barbarians. First of all, they call themselves Romans, but they're really Franks. And as far as the Byzantines are concerned, all of the various Western Europeans are just Franks. And the Franks are a bunch of stinky, foul-smelling, bad, hygienic, you get the idea, barbarians. And yeah, they're Christian, but they're sort of stupid, stubbornly anti-Greek Latin Christians. And so there's a schism between the East and the West. And the Byzantines don't like the Western Christians, and they don't like the Franks, the people that they call the Franks. And there's a lot of disdain there, because the Byzantines still are Romans, and the Franks are just barbarians. However, the Franks, the people of Christendom, the people of Western Europe, are powerful. They have military strength and economic strength, and they're not in the process of being eaten by the Seljuk Turks. So a call goes out by the emperor to the Pope, please help us. We need help. The Muslims have broken through the Kilikian gates. They're threatening Constantinople directly. They're threatening the existence of our empire. And yeah, we've had our differences, but we're still Christians, just like you are. And would you really throw your fellow Christian to the Muslims? Furthermore, if they break through our empire, you're next. So we could use help. Please help us. Pope Urban II receives this, and he looks around his society. Christendom is divided into a bunch of different kingdoms, and each kingdom is divided into a bunch of different duchies, and each duchy is divided into a bunch of different counties, and each county is divided into a bunch of different baronies, and each barony has a bunch of knights that support the baron. Everything's divided. The Christian church in the West has had to make rules of war because the barons and the counts and the dukes and the kings keep fighting one another. So to try to keep the damage of the fighting limited, the Christians are given rules for Christian warfare by the Pope. They don't apply if you're fighting barbarians or if you're fighting Muslims, but Christians fighting other Christians in the West should follow these rules. The fact that those rules exist mean that the violence is high. Plus, the Pope fully understands that even though we're building cities again, it's not like Roman times. Charlemagne was supposed to bring back the hope of Europe, and he did. But as good as things are, couldn't they be better? Back in the throughout the mid to late 20th century, Americans and others looked back on World War II, and they saw a time when everyone came together to fight the enemy. And all of the things that people normally squabble about, workers versus factory owners, different gangs, and that was all under the surface. Because if we don't come together, the Germans or the Japanese are going to win the war, and we don't want that. So World War II, largely rightly, is considered to be a time when this country, America, comes together like never before. And it's remembered that way in Britain also. Well, the Pope looks back and he sees that as the idealized Roman times. And that's what Charlemagne was supposed to do. He was supposed to bring everything together. So what people then and now talk about is if we want to solve society's problems, we want to have a moral equivalent of war. A moral equivalent of war. I'll write that down because it's so darn important. A moral equivalent of war. In other words, something that should cause us to forget that our differences exist to the extent that we remember that what we have in common is more important. The space program was like that when I was a kid. Democrats and Republicans were all proud that we went to the moon, that we were exploring the bounds of space. By now, we were supposed to have orbital space stations. Well, we sort of got one of those, but not as big as we had hoped. And we were supposed to have moon bases. We were supposed to have mining on the moon, solar collection in orbit, the collection of solar power and transmission to Earth. And damn it, we were supposed to be on Mars by now, at least exploring the place, and going out to the asteroids and looting them for all the mineral wealth they have. Instead, we're how can I say this? No, enough. To hell with it. Instead, we're squabbling about what he, she, it is. What people's pronouns are. It's not as good as going to Mars. It's not as good as us all coming together as a human species. If you ever want to understand what will unify the world, it will be when alien starships show up in our solar system. Because at that point, it won't matter what ethnic group you are, or what gender you are, or anything, because the aliens will be coming.
They'd be friendly.
Yeah. I'm sure the Aztecs thought that before Cortez arrived. They'll be friendly.
Cortez was an alien, right? Didn't the aliens take out the Aztecs? Confirmedly. It was aliens.
It was the will of the giant flying spaghetti monster.
Or no, the Mayans was aliens.
The Mayans was aliens. The Aztecs believed. Remember, we talked about this earlier in the year. They believed that Quetzalcoatl, the flying snake god, was going to appear in some form on the day when Cortez arrives. Basically at the place where Cortez arrives. So Cortez is considered by many Aztecs at the time to be the personification of Quetzalcoatl. And what's Quetzalcoatl's job? He's the judge of the change. He's going to usher in the end of the current age and the beginning of a new age. And Cortez sure does that. But I'm telling you, if we encountered aliens, they're not going to be human beings with bumps on their head that speak English like in Star Trek. They're going to be genuinely different from us. And to hope that they're going to be more Christian than we are and more merciful towards us primitives who haven't even gone to Mars yet, that's really...
What would you do if they tried giving you a hug, though?
Yeah, but for them, a hug might be a precursor to them devouring
But
me.
you don't know, so you gotta do it still.
Well, you got to do it. Then again, you want to meet the flying piranha birds.
Don't knock it till you try it.
That's right. Alien love. Yes.
What if the reason we haven't discovered aliens yet is because we are the most advanced technological species?
That's entirely possible, but I think in a universe that's almost 15,000 million years old, with galaxies that we can't even count, and star systems that are barely countable within each galaxy, I think the likelihood of that is much less likely than the rest of the civilized universe, who long past using radio, says stay away from the Earth. The Earth has human beings. You don't want to catch human beings, do you? It's possible. We don't know. That's the wonderful thing. Someday in the future, human beings will know more about what's going on out there in the stars, and at that point, they won't be able to look at the night sky and wonder. We still can do that. That's kind of fun. We can imagine there's anything out there. Zarkon battle fleets or beautiful flower people that just want to spread love like pollen. Who knows? It could be anything.
Well, isn't all flying piranha creatures?
That could be actually going from world to world. Interstellar, space flying piranha creatures. There's a story there. The next time you are given the opportunity of writing a short story in English class or something, consider that as a possibility. Yeah.
Aliens ever come? You know who we need to call? Jimmy Neutron.
Jimmy Neutron. What about Buzz Lightyear?
No, that dude's fake.
Okay.
No, you can't. Jimmy Neutron went to space without a space helmet.
There we go. Yes.
Okay, so do you think that it's probably just that other species are like killing each other out before they can like do
Some
that? Like,
certainly
'cause
are.
humans are really close to that, and we've almost done it a few times.
I know. Look,
Do you think that humans are just really dumb, or is like every civilization fighting that? Fighting the urge to kill themselves.
the popular scientist Carl Sagan said that every race goes through what's called technological adolescence. Technological adolescence is when you have the technology to destroy yourself, but not the wisdom to use it. We're there. We've been there since we developed mustard gas. With enough mustard gas, you can destroy the world. But we didn't do that yet. Then we developed atom bombs, which helped end World War II, which is a good thing. But now we've got people who are gangsters like Putin and power-hungry madmen like Xi in China who are openly doing something that we and the Soviets never did in the Cold War, which is openly threatening the casual use of nuclear weapons. Because it's just nukes, baby. You know, why worry about that? So yes, I think that there is a probable stage of technological adolescence that most societies reach. But I have to believe that some get through that. I also have to believe that given an alien mentality and an alien physicality and alien environment, their problems will probably be different from ours. Their psychological blind spots probably will be different. But yes, I think that there is a thinning out. But I have to believe that somewhere out there are ancient beings that have their own problems. You're never going to get rid of problems because you exist. If you exist, you get problems.
They could have just evolved, because they could have evolved from evolution would have happened completely differently.
Yeah, it would have.
You know, even if evolution had started in like a different pool
Yes,
of amino acids,
of course,
we wouldn't even look like humans.
No, we'd be giant slug people.
Like sacks of
like the people of Jupiter, which are basically flying donuts that fly through the atmosphere, thinking thoughts like whales. Except these are whales that know trigonometry.
Oh, okay.
There's another story there.
Whales could learn trigonometry.
They could. You never know, but they have no thumbs, so they can't do anything.
Actually, have you ever seen a picture of like a degloved?
Yes, I have, but they've got the mittens on. Anyway, we'll talk. Yeah. The point is, what the Pope sees in this opportunity is a chance to do two things. One, show those damn busies who's the boss. Who's in charge? The busies, the Byzantines. They're coming to us, busybodies. So we'll get to help them. And we'll get to show our superiority, which is always fun. But in doing so, we might have the moral equivalent of war. In fact, it's war. We're going to call everyone to, hey, the Muslims have been beating us over the head. Jihad, jihad, jihad. For hundreds of years. Almost 400 years of Islamic jihad. And we lost so much territory to them. It's time for Christian holy war. Crusade! 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 So don't look like that. They're onward Christian soldiers marching off to war. You got to have something. So, in any event, you're right. In any event, we're going to have, Pope Urban II says, Deus Vult, God wills it. Deus Vult, God wills it, which is something you should write down. Deus Vult, God wills it. And he puts out a call across all of Christendom for people, for men of goodwill, to come and fight the infidel. But it's not just for the Byzantines. No. The Pope says we've got to fight to protect the pilgrims, so we've got to fight to free the Holy Land. Now, that's not what the Byzantine emperor wanted, but it might help the Byzantine emperor's cause if that happened. So the call goes out, high and low. Now, high, you've got the Pope. Low, you've got a guy named Peter the Hermit. Peter the Hermit is not the Pope. He's a hermit. Particularly, he's a peasant. And he goes around speaking to the non-noblemen of Europe, saying, Gott mit uns. Gott mit uns. God is with us. So, Gott mit uns. G-O-T-T. He was German. M-I-T-U-N-S. I'm sure I'm screwing that up in some way. God is with us. So God wills it. God is with us. Pope Urban II, Peter the Hermit. The cry goes out. And a bunch of second sons and third sons, people who won't inherit the land, take up the cry. Throughout the Holy Roman Empire of the German nation, throughout the Kingdom of France, even from England, second and third son noblemen begin to polish their armor off and leave home and march south and east and gather for the crossing into the Byzantine Empire and then beyond. It's an army like the Christian world has never seen. You've got people from all over. And being second and third sons, what they've got is they've got their willingness to fight, their skills. The family is going to be in the hands of the older son. So we're disposable, which means we have an opportunity to take great risks for God. And if we happen to capture some land and make it ours, we're going to be the first sons. It's going to be our land. We're going to be the founders of new dynasties. Yep. God, glory, and gold. Whenever you leave home to do something great, the three motives are God, glory, and gold. So, the Crusaders arrive in Constantinople and greeted well, and the emperor wishes them well and hopes that they'll march east and drive the Persians out of Anatolia. Well, the Crusaders march east, and they fight their way through the Persians in Anatolia. But they're not driving the Persians out. They're punching a hole through. They're not pushing the Persians out. And they successfully fight their way through armies of Persians. And they go through the Kilikian gates, and they leave. This helps the Byzantines, but not quite in the way they wanted. Still, it's better than nothing. And the Christian Crusaders then marched south along the Levantine coast of the eastern Mediterranean towards Jerusalem. And they're fighting their way through Islamic army after Islamic army. Now, the Muslims tend to be lightly armed because it's hot. And they tend to have a lot of light cavalry, horse archers, horse lancers, horse swordsmen, and light to medium infantry. The Europeans, on the other hand, have smaller numbers, but they have much heavier armor, much larger horses. They've got Clydesdales that they ride. Clydesdales are big draft horses that pull wagons. Well, they were not originated to pull wagons. They were originated to carry knights into battle. So in the Christian army, you've got heavy forces. And when the heavy forces of the Christians meet the lighter forces of the Arabs, the Christians punch through them. The Arabs have numbers, the Arabs have speed, but the Christians are determinedly moving in an organized fashion south towards Jerusalem. And the Arabs can't stop them. The Turks can't stop them, the Arabs can't stop them. And they capture Jerusalem. Nobody thought it was possible. They capture it. The First Crusade captures Jerusalem. That's an amazing thing. Wow! And the word goes out that the First Crusade is a success because they captured Jerusalem, and Jerusalem is the holy city. But then, later, the Turks and the Arabs counterattack. And when the Turks and the Arabs counterattack, they fight their way to Jerusalem, and they drive the Christians from Jerusalem. And in doing that, a call goes out for another crusade to bring Jerusalem back into the hands of the Christians. Would people in back please close the shades, close the slats? Jaden, would you close the slats? And shut the lights. And I will pause this video because I'm going to play a song that deals with it. So, you might ask yourself, why was Jerusalem so important? Well, first off, actually, before I even do that, the song is wrong in this sense, because the song implies that Richard Lionheart led to the conquest of Jerusalem back from the Saracens, which is the generic term for the Muslims in these wars. No. Richard did not recapture Jerusalem. But Richard did fight the Kurdish general Saladin to a standstill. In fact, their battles back and forth are some of the most interesting military history in the Middle Ages. They were a well-matched set of opponents. They both had good general chops, if you will. And they both had armies that were willing to fight hard for what they believed. So, crusading captures Jerusalem in the First Crusade. And in later crusade, after Jerusalem is lost, it attracts the interest of the kings. The thought is that the second sons aren't enough. If Europe is going to truly take Jerusalem back, we need the A game. We need the first string. Again, why is Jerusalem important? Well, Jerusalem is the holy city of God to the Jews. It's the capital of the Promised Land. It's the capital of Israel. It's a hilltop town in Judea, near Bethlehem. Jerusalem is where the kings of Israel and later the kings of Judah ruled from. Jerusalem was the heart of the Jewish land when the Babylonians took over. Jerusalem became the heart of the Jewish land when the Persians took over and gave it back. Jerusalem is where Solomon's temple was built. Jerusalem is where Herod and the others rebuilt Solomon's temple. Jerusalem is where the Jewish revolt, the first Jewish revolt, was destroyed. When Jerusalem was destroyed and burned to the ground and the Temple of Solomon wrecked. Jerusalem was the place that Hadrian banished the Jews from, renaming it Aelia Capitolina. Jerusalem is where Jesus was tried, crucified, and resurrected. And according to the Quran, Jerusalem is where the Prophet Muhammad ascended in body into the heavens, on the Temple Mount. The Temple Mount, where the Temple of Solomon was, is the holiest place on the planet to all monotheists, or one of the holiest places. The Temple Mount is where the Temple of God used to be. The only part of this that's left is the western wall of the base foundation of the plateau where the temple was built, which is called the Western Wall or the Wailing Wall. If you ever see pictures of Jews in Israel praying and lamenting in front of a big stone wall, that's it. That's why. It's the last remnant of the Temple of Solomon. To Christians, when Jerusalem was briefly in Christian hands for a few years, the Christians built a church there, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. So an important Christian church is there. And Jesus did go to the temple, and he beat the money changers there, and it's somewhat important to Christians. But when Muhammad ascends to heaven, he ascends also at the Temple Mount. It's where the Al-Aqsa Mosque is, which next to Mecca is one of the holiest places in all of Islam. Possibly the holiest place in all of Islam next to Mecca and the Kaaba itself. So today, the Al-Aqsa Mosque is atop the Temple Mount, which is holy to Muslims because that's where Muhammad ascends. It's holy to Christians because Christ was there, although it's less important to Christians than to the other two. And it's the holy temple of God, the only remnant of it to the Jews. So it's basically considered to be the heart of the Holy Land. You've got the Holy Land, which is Israel, and then you've got Jerusalem, and you've got the Al-Aqsa Mosque, or the Temple Mount, or whatever you want to call it. Holiest place on earth to monotheists of all kinds. So, we're going to recapture it. And we're going to recapture it with the Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, Friedrich Barbarossa, whose name means Freddie Redbeard. Friedrich Barbarossa had this big honking beard, and he had red hair, I mean bright red hair. And King Richard Lionheart of England joined him. And I believe for a while the King of France joined him. So you've got the leaders of the three major nations of Christendom, Germany, France, and Britain, coming together to do this crusade. Friedrich falls off his horse in full armor crossing a stream in Eastern Europe and drowns. Dies. Not a glorious end for Friedrich. The King of France turns back at some point. Yeah.
That makes me remember this picture. I saw this picture in India. A guy pulled a sword out somewhere like near Jerusalem. He pulled like a sword out of the water from the Crusades, and the caption on the picture was like, "Imagine how bad it would suck to cross the whole ocean to crusade, and then you lose your sword." Went right like outside of Jerusalem.
Chances are the guy was dead when he lost his sword, but yes, that's funny. It speaks to the irony of life, and anytime a comedian points out the irony of life, it's funny, because life is painfully ironic all the time. If you find it, send it to me. I'd love to see it. So, Richard is the only one of the kings to actually arrive and stay in the Holy Land. Friedrich's dead, the French king goes back, and he fights back and forth with Saladin, but doesn't ever recapture Jerusalem. And eventually he goes home, and there's the story I told you about him being ransomed in Germany and then escaping and so forth, and then dying, and then King John and Magna Carta and all that. But the Crusader kingdoms, even though they don't have Jerusalem, still have a bunch of territory around Jerusalem, along the coast of what is today Israel and Lebanon. The new center of Christian activities is a place that I've always called Acre, spelled A-C-R-E, but I've heard people pronounce Acre because it looks like acre. I have not looked up the proper pronunciation of the Christian coastal base in the Crusades. So I'll probably call it Acre just because that seems to be the most likely, but in my mind I'm saying Acre, just so you know. So, what's going to go on now that the kings have left? Well, the Crusaders are still fighting, and they would like to have a permanent presence in the Holy Land, whether they have Jerusalem or not. After all, a bunch of new dynasties were founded. Plus, we like it here. It's nice here. They've got hot baths here. They've got soap. They've got a bunch of other stuff. They've got silk clothing. I don't have to wear linen underclothes anymore. I've got silk. It's great. Spiced foods. So, one of the things that's established is orders of crusading knights. Now, the most famous of these is the Knights Templar. And these are from the Knights of the Temple Mount. Now, the Knights Templar start out as a Hospitalier order. Hospitalier, can any of you guess what they do?
They heal.
They heal, that's right. Hospitaliers start out healing. What these are a bunch of basically Christian warrior monks. The Knights Templar start out healing the wounded. But they come from all over Europe, and they become an important steward of a lot of the secrets and the treasures of the Crusade. Now, the Crusades end 700, 800 years ago. The Knights Templar are still around. They're one of the things that conspiracy theorists focus on when they figure out who's running the world from behind the scenes. There's the Bavarian Illuminati, which come from the 1700s, and there's the Knights Templar. And if you've ever played an Assassin's Creed video game, the Knights Templar feature big as the villains in that.
I think also like the Freemasons.
Yeah, the Freemasons, I was going to mention that next. You have the Freemasons. And, of course, there are people who believe that the Jews are an international conspiracy as well. Anyhow, if I was running the world as an international conspiracy, I might do a better job than having every great power be anti-Semitic at one time or another and commit vile acts of atrocity against my people. If the Jews are running the world from behind the scenes, they're doing a terrible job for themselves because they constantly get persecuted. So, no, I personally don't believe anyone is running the world from behind the scenes. George Soros wants to, but he isn't doing it yet. The World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab wants to, but they're not doing it yet. And I don't think they ever will, because people aren't smart enough to run the world. Yes?
What if they have to try to make themselves look like they're weak so that everyone underestimates them? So when the time comes, they can snap and the entire world will be taken over.
Yeah, that would be so cool, but I don't think so because the Holocaust and pogroms and other things. I think they're trying too hard if they're doing that. It's the old, I would look stupid and make my opponents underestimate me. It's a great idea. I don't think it really works, though. It's just too uncomfortable. So the Knights Templar are one of several crusading orders of knights that come out of the Crusades. And the Knights Templar, the Knights of Malta, they still exist. And it's an honor to be chosen to be one of them. Now, when we come back, we'll talk about how the Crusades go south. For now, any questions, comments, or thoughts? Flying piranha, flying piranha, flying piranha. Okay, we're done. Thank you. You can talk among yourselves.
Bro, think about